Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you our final conference when it comes to these updated college football predictions. Today we're taking a look at the Sun Belt, a conference known for some fantastic offense, but some really abysmal defense. And just like all the other Group of 5 conferences that have chosen to play this fall, the Sun Belt adapted their own method of 8 conference games, per usual, and then up to 4 non-conference games. So as you can see, not all of these teams are playing the same amount of games. No one is playing less than 10. I believe it is Georgia State up here that is playing just 10 games. The majority of the conference members are playing 11 or 12, but they are not all the same. So in a video like this, and in scenarios like this, it is obviously the conference games that matter the most. It's the conference games and those wins and losses that dictate where these teams stack up within the standings and how we base our predictions off of these as well. So keep that in mind as we go through these Sun Belt predictions and these updated records due to COVID-19. Keep that in mind for all the other Group of 5 conferences that we have already completed. Some of these games could still get postponed. Some of these teams could still add games. We just don't know what's going to happen over these next few weeks, and that's something that we're just trying to continue to deal with one day at a time. But we wanted to bring you these predictions now, guys, because Week 1 of college football starts this Thursday, September 3rd. There was not much time left, so let's go ahead and break it down. We'll start over here in the East, where it's probably not that big of a surprise to see Appalachian State, the Mountaineers, at number 1 in the standings. We have them at 10-1, 7-1 in conference play. So we do, in fact, have them dropping one conference game. When you look at Appalachian State, Sean Clark is becoming the 3rd head coach of the Mountaineers in 3 years. They had Scott Satterfield a few years ago. They had Eli Drinkwitz. Satterfield's now gone to Louisville. Drinkwitz has now gone to Missouri. Sean Clark now steps in for the Mountaineers. And I can't imagine that he is going to bolt for a Power 5 job at the conclusion of 2020. The 3rd coach in 3 years, yet Appalachian State continues to thrive and continues to do so well, mostly because a lot of the players that have really been the reason for this success over the past few years have stuck around. None bigger than their quarterback in Zach Thomas, who accounted for over 3,100 total yards last year and 35 total touchdowns. App State's defense is still arguably the best in the Sun Belt. They held teams to just 20 points per game last year. And Thomas, a dual-threat QB, returns a very strong offensive line and a couple of his top wide receivers as well. So despite a brand new head coach, despite unfortunate season circumstances, App State is still the team to beat in the Sun Belt. Below them, we have Georgia Southern, clocking in at 7-4, 5-3 in conference play. Georgia Southern is one of those teams, guys, that is so difficult to stop. You know what they're going to run. You know Chad Lunsford's going to run that option offense, and yet you can't figure out how to stop it. They're very similar to the likes of those military academies like Army and Navy and Air Force. And here's Georgia Southern, a team that averages 253.2 rushing yards per game, and they bring back all of their top rushers, the guys that are really the reason for these ridiculous stats, and their quarterback in Shai Wertz, and then Wesley Kennedy and J.D. King. So the offense, to me, could be even better than they were in 2019. Why don't we go for 260 rushing yards per game? So I'm not too worried about that for the Eagles. What I am worried about is their defense. Georgia Southern allowed 6.1 yards per play last year. That's bad. That is bad, guys. 6.1 yards per play last year. They do have a very strong front seven in 2020. It's the secondary that's the biggest concern. So I do think those yards per play numbers decrease a little bit. But when you're going up against strong quarterbacks, such as Zach Thomas, such as maybe a Lane Hatcher at Arkansas State, what is this secondary for the Eagles able to do? And how will that kind of decide whether they can really contend for an East crown against the Mountaineers, or whether they're still just middle of the pack and will once again make another trip to the postseason. After Georgia Southern, we have Troy coming in at 500, 6-6, making a bowl game in year 2 under Chip Lindsey. They just missed out on one last year, guys, and this is a tough spot for Chip Lindsey to be in because we know Lindsey's a fantastic offensive mind. This head coaching job for him was very well deserved. And I might have Troy doing even better in 2020 had they not lost their quarterback in Caleb Barker, a guy who threw for over 3,600 yards and 30 touchdowns last year. So the Trojans quickly have to find themselves a brand new quarterback to replace Barker. But whoever it is going to be just fine because he has a very strong wide receiver core. B.J. Smith, who missed most of last year with an injury, is back at running back, and he's quite the bruiser as a running back. So I think whoever they find at quarterback, if they can build some chemistry quickly and pan out better than maybe people think, Troy offensively will be just fine. Like Georgia Southern, it's the defense that has to improve after allowing 34.8 points per game in 2019. After Troy, we still have another team that is at 500, guys. You know, you only have 5 teams in each division here. So you look and you say, well, I'm finishing 4th out of 5 in my conference standings. You say, well, that's horrible. But you look at Georgia State, they're still going bowling. They're 5-5 overall, which means they would be going to a bowl game in 2020. Really not too bad. You look at Georgia State, they're very similar to Troy. Defense has to improve drastically. They've got to find themselves a new quarterback. They lose their star dual threat QB in Dan Ellington. Georgia State, obviously the highlight of last year for them was not making a bowl game, but of course was upsetting Tennessee in that season opener. And while I won't have the luxury and the opportunity to do something like that again, I do believe that this is a team that will return to the postseason, which is really what Panthers faithful have to really bank on and really what they have to get excited for. Georgia State's not to the point where they can contend for a Sun Belt title, but to make constant bowl games under Sean Elliott, I'd say that's pretty dang good. They got to find a new quarterback. The defense returns 9 starters along with a couple key transfers. And I believe the Panthers, who lost their bowl game last year to Wyoming, will certainly improve in 2020. And then finally, right after Georgia State, and last, but really not that bad either, 5-6 Coastal Carolina, the Chanticleers. They went 5-7 in 2019, but they had 4 losses by 7 points or less, guys. So Coastal was so close to getting to the postseason. Jamie Chadwell, I thought, did a fantastic job in his first full year as head coach with the Chanticleers. I think at 5-6, it's probably good enough to get them to the postseason this year. They've got plenty of offensive talent. They have 6 returning starters back on the defensive side of the ball. If a couple of plays had gone their way last year, they could have been 6-6, maybe even 7-5. So the talent was there. And a lot of that talent comes back this year, where I do believe Coastal should be going to the postseason in 2020. So you take a look at the East. You look at this. It's App State at the top, then it's everybody else. But from top to bottom, it's relatively competitive. More so than the West, which is really a 2-team race. Louisiana and Arkansas State. So yes, Appalachian State's the king of the Sun Belt. You don't want to be in a division with Appalachian State, but at least in the East, you have competition. You might have a chance if Appalachian State slips up, you can slide in there. In the West, it's 2 teams. That's it. We'll start with Louisiana, who's won the West in back-to-back seasons. They've won the West 2 years in a row, and Billy Napier doing a fantastic job with his Ragin' Cajuns. They're coming off the best season in program history, where Louisiana won their bowl game, but also won 11 games in 2019. That is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely insane. And this team, from top to bottom, offense and defense, was so tough to stop. They averaged nearly 38 points per game last year, while only giving up 19.7. You look at Louisiana, they returned their star quarterback in Levi Lewis. So that's huge already. Levi Lewis is back, dangerous dual threat QB. Better yet for Louisiana is that their dual-headed monster, their double threat there of Elijah Mitchell and Trey Regis are back at running back. Great quarterback, great running backs, couple receivers they got to replace, but I think they'll be just fine. And one of the biggest storylines that I think kind of got overshadowed because they're Louisiana and they're not a Power 5 school or anything, it's the fact that the Ragin' Cajuns improved their defense last year by 14.5 points per game. No one talked about that. But to improve your defense by over 2 touchdowns, that's almost unheard of. It's insane. Louisiana improved their defense by 14.5 points per game. They were allowing over 33 points per game in 2018. They allowed less than 20 in 2019. And Louisiana right now is the team to beat in the West. We have them at 9-2, 7-1 in conference play. That Appalachian State matchup in the regular season could decide where the Sun Belt Conference Championship game will be played. Below Louisiana, we have Arkansas State, and a very emotional season for Arkansas State in 2019. Obviously, their head coach, Blake Anderson, lost his wife, Wendy, to cancer early in the season. He actually missed a few games due to her passing. So an emotional season for him, an emotional season for his players that were there by his side every step of the way. And you really saw, to me, Arkansas State and just the college football world as a whole come together during such a tragic event like that. And Arkansas State, I really thought, exceeded expectations due to their circumstances, not just because of what happened with the Anderson family, but also because they lost their quarterback, Logan Bonner, early in the season and had to throw in Lane Hatcher, a freshman, a redshirt freshman, in as QB, and he did just fine, was one of the better quarterbacks within the Sun Belt and statistically up there as one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So now you have two capable quarterbacks, whoever Blake Anderson chooses to go with, Logan Bonner or Lane Hatcher, and I personally believe it will be Hatcher. You have two capable quarterbacks there to lead an offense that was averaging over 34 points per game last year. And you look at A-State again, while they do lose their top two wide receivers in Kirk Merritt and Omar Bayless, they've got a great guy in Jonathan Adams to fill that void. They've got a great running back in Marcel Murray back as well. Again, it's just the defense for A-State, as it is for many of these Sun Belt schools, that has to improve and be better. They allowed over 34 points per game and only have 3 starters back. So A-State, again, they can light you up offensively. Many of their games probably will be a shootout because I don't know how well A-State is going to be able to stop their opponents, especially elite offenses such as App State and Louisiana. Following Arkansas State, you have South Alabama. Steve Campbell enters his 3rd year with the Jaguars, guys, and he's just 5-19. He's entering year 3. He went 3-9 in his first year. He went 2-10 in his second year. He's 5-19 overall. And all I'm going to say about South Alabama is they've got to improve their offense and they've got to find consistency there. They have struggled to find any sort of stability at the quarterback position. They've struggled to find any sort of consistency offensively, and they were one of the worst offenses in the country last year, averaging just 18.4 points per game. You can't win in the Sun Belt if you can't put points on the board. After South Alabama, you kind of have your cellar dwellers, Louisiana Monroe and Texas State, and these two could come as a surprise to some. Maybe not necessarily their position in the standings, but it's their records. And we'll start with the Warhawks of Louisiana Monroe. And again, I get that a lot of people are going to dog on this one. They went 5-7 last year. So how can we have them going 2-10? Go take a look at their schedule first. It's extremely, extremely difficult. But to go along with that is the amount of talent that Louisiana Monroe lost. They lose their star quarterback in Caleb Evans, who by himself averaged over 311 yards per game, total yards per game. Their defense was one of the worst in the country. They allowed 38.7 points per game. So you lose a quarterback, you got to replace it. Your defense is still going to struggle a little bit because I don't see Louisiana Monroe improving as drastically as Louisiana did. And you're going to have to rely on your running back. And while you do have Josh Johnson, who rushed for over 1,200 yards last year, you can only use him so much, especially early in the season. Pair that with a very difficult schedule, not just against Louisiana and Arkansas State, but many of the teams in the West and in the non-conference as well. I do believe the Warhawks take a major step back. 2-10, it's very unfortunate, very bad. 1-7 in conference play, even worse. But at the end of the day, it's just going to be one of those years that for some of these group of 5 schools, because of the way the schedules are lined up, because of the circumstances we're having to deal with, some of these records are going to be strongly affected by that. Monroe is one of them. And then finally, to round out the Sun Belt predictions, guys, we have Texas State 0-12. How can we have Texas State going 0-12 in Jake Spavital's second year with the Bobcats? Well, first off, Texas State is no powerhouse. The Bobcats have won 3 games or less every year over the past 5 seasons. They've gone 3-9 or worse each year over the past 5 seasons. They only return 9 starters total this season. They have a quarterback battle between Brady McBride, the transfer from Memphis, or Tyler Vitt, who has a little bit of playing experience with the Bobcats. Either way, their offense was nothing to get excited about last year, and that's disappointing considering Spavital's more of an offensive-minded coach. Keep in mind, he came over as offensive coordinator from West Virginia. Another reason, Texas State, we haven't been 0-12. Again, like Louisiana Monroe, a very difficult schedule. Non-conference games against SMU, at BYU, at Boston College. They could snag a win over Texas San Antonio, dealing with a new head coach in Jeff Traylor, but I like the way the Roadrunners are set up better than the Bobcats. That's just in the non-conference. Then they play, obviously, Louisiana. They play Appalachian State out of the East. They go on the road to Georgia Southern out of the East. Arkansas State's no pushover. All those things added up, combined with the recent success of Texas State, I think they're in for a very, very rough 2020, a season where I truly don't think they win a single game. And I honestly hate to say that because I hate seeing teams go winless. So after all of that, we have our projected Sun Belt Conference Championship game, a rematch between Louisiana and Appalachian State. They've met the past few years in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. They will meet in the regular season this year. It will be at App State. And because Appalachian State will own that tiebreaker, both are at 7-1, but Appalachian State will own the head-to-head. The game will be played in North Carolina, will be played at the Mountaineers. And in this game, guys, you look at Billy Napier in Louisiana. They've been so close. They've been so close. You know, they can't get over the hump. They can't beat Appalachian State. Last year, relatively close, relatively high scoring. The regular season meeting, not so much. Could see it being the same way this year. But in 2020, in the 2020 Sun Belt Conference Championship game, I do in fact have Louisiana winning the conference. I do believe the Raging Cajuns finally get over the hump. I believe they take down the mighty Mountaineers of Appalachian State. And while App State does have so much talent, I'm not saying that the new coach is the reason they will not win the Sun Belt this year, because they did it last year at Drinkwitz. I know Zach Thomas is probably the best quarterback in the Sun Belt right now. But again, like we said, from top to bottom, I believe Louisiana is the most talented and the deepest team in the Sun Belt this season. And after getting so close but failing every single time, I think they finally get a break that goes their way, and they upset the Mountaineers at home to claim a Sun Belt title under Billy Napier. And with that win, would bump them up to 10 on the year. A bowl win would tie the best mark in program history with 11 total victories. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Our final conference of these updated predictions, all thanks to COVID-19. That's our sponsor for this entire year. But once again, as always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share our videos. Check out everything down in the descriptions below where you can follow us on our social media pages over on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also check out everything in our website, thegridironexpert.com, where you can help support us through our newsletter, our expert picks, and our brand new Patreon account as well, where you'll get exclusive content that will never ever be posted here on YouTube, only for our members over on Patreon. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.